So this panel is going to address the education market and the idiosyncrasies in the education market from different vantage points, and that's because we've got entrepreneurs and operators on this panel who have are operating education companies at different stages, and so we'll field a number of questions, but I think you might want to just be particularly sensitive to, after they introduce themselves, who's giving the answer and the breadth of the experience that they've had, which informs that answer. So the first question that I want to pose to everyone is, who are you? So give some background on yourselves and your past activities and your present activities so that everybody here really has a good understanding of who's commenting and where your perspective is coming from. Itai, why don't you start?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Itay Koppel. I'm one of the co-founder of Proprep. Proprep is a company that creates content for STEM courses. We have video tutorials and study guides, online study guides. And basically, we afford all the students and all the universities customized course according to their syllabi. We started the operation here in Israel about 10 years ago with a company called Gul. Gul basically made the silent revolution, we call it, here in Israel. And about 25% of the students in Israel who study STEM use our platform. And when I say use, basically, they purchase from our platform their materials to study their STEM courses. Recently, the universities came to us and started to purchase for their students this content. And 4 years ago, after we felt that the business model is very strong, we decided to go west to the US. And we created the Proprep. And Proprep is focusing on the US market, and for the last 4 years we have been creating the content for the US market, and we launched the activities in the US recently, beginning of this academic year. So this week we are finalizing the first academic year in the US, and we are very happy with it.
Thank you. Okay, Gaku.
Hi everyone. I'm Gaku, co-founder and CEO of RareJob, coming from Japan. What I do right now is online English tutorial in Japan. What I do is we have around 4,000 tutors in the Philippines, and then they teach English to Japanese people using Skype or web communication tool. We started this company from 2007, and right now we conduct every day more than 10,000 lessons. One lesson is 25 minutes lesson, and it's one-on-one, so we can have lots of students. And 4 years ago, we got listed to Tokyo Stock Exchange market, and our revenue right now is around $30 million US. Thank you.
Okay, and John?
So I introduced myself before, but briefly, the company I'm running now is a studio of 4 EdTech companies. Noodle Search is trying to be TripAdvisor for education. Can we help students find the right school, the right tutor, the right coach of any sort? Noodle, first in the US and eventually, hopefully globally, Noodle Partners works with higher ed to try to bring them online in smart ways. We think we can lower the cost of higher education significantly while improving its engagement. Noodle Markets is a US-specific company that works with districts and schools across the country across the US, to try to help them buy things. They spend about $130 billion a year buying things, and they buy the wrong things and they spend too much money on them. And then finally, Noodle Pros is a new concept in tutoring for very experienced tutors.
Okay, John, I'm going to start with you. all entrepreneurs are mission-driven in some sense, they're passionate, but there's something uniquely mission-oriented about education ventures. When you started these various companies, what was your mindset? What problem were you looking to solve? And what role did wealth creation play in your decision to launch these ventures?
When I started Princeton Review, it was just to create a tutoring company, run it for a couple years, and use it to fund a software company I wanted to do. And then it just sort of took off, and I went with that. There was no real intent. But my feeling has been from there that really there is a dual bottom line, that we can create, in the case of 2U, that we can prove that great universities can go online well, can build great programs. And now running Noodle Partners, if we can reduce the cost of higher ed by taking all of the things that aren't faculty and make them more efficient, while better supporting faculty to do their job, it would be a tremendous good thing. And certainly, you know, the companies I've built have created some value and some wealth for me and for a bunch of other people. But I think that's a byproduct of finding market fit. It's not a goal.
Gaku, you want to field that question?
In our case, our mission is encourage 10 million Japanese students to be fluent in English. So this is our mission. And if our mission is achieved, then we think that there is a very big impact to Japan, or not only to Japan, but maybe to the world. And to achieve that, our mission, I think also monetization is very important. If users do not feel that it is valuable, they don't pay money. So we have to create the service that people might pay willingly. And to do that, we have to solve the very big issue to the users. Our big issues that we solved before was there was no places to speak English in Japan. And there are lots of people who would like to speak more and more English. If there is a place like that, then many Japanese thought that they could be able to speak English fluently. So that's why we created and we solved that issue. And then that's why we could monetize from it.
Itai?
Our mission, I can say that speak highly about realizing and maximizing every student's abilities in STEM courses. But at the end of the day, when you see a student that studies STEM courses and studies through our system and through our customized courses, and he succeeds in his exam, and he doesn't have to feel all the agony of failing the exam in STEM courses, which is the hugest barrier to any student. So at the end of the day, this is what makes you feel good about yourself, and this is the mission, to make students happier and to make them have the ability to study STEM courses in an affordable way and in a way that will assist them at the end of the day to have mobility in society.
Okay, so it sounds like all of you are saying that if you do your job at doing good well, then a byproduct will be you can do well as well. You all agree with that?
Yeah.
So Gaku, let me, I know all of you have had investors and some of you have experience in the public markets. From the standpoint of the early money that you've taken into your companies, I've heard people say education is a great get-rich-slowly scheme. So to the extent that you agree with that, how do you manage expectations from your investors? And have you ever experienced tension between your mission-related objectives and the return objectives of your investors. Gaku, why don't you take that one?
Well, we had a Series A on 2008, and at that time, we selected the VCs which has same mission with us. If they don't have same mission with us, then we didn't select the VCs. So we have the same goal with VC and us, so we were able to do it with them. But sometimes there is a tension between VCs and us. VCs told us that they should go public as possible, as fast as you can. But we wanted to invest more because we would like to create better educational services. But it didn't. It has a very big tension, so we had to talk a lot with investors. And once we got another investor again, then we were able to solve that issue of the tensions.
John?
Other people's money comes with other people. And to some degree, there's a certain tension in any EdTech company between the goals of your clients, the goals of your investors, the goals of the team itself, which is tough to resolve and in fact, it's impossible to resolve. Dual bottom line really does mean dual bottom line. You really need to make promises and keep them, both to your clients and to your investors, and you got to keep them from talking too much to each other.
Right. Itai, to the extent that you agree with that, would you say in your experience it's wisest to look for dual bottom line, social impact oriented investors, or do you feel confidently that, as we said earlier, if you're doing your job right on the mission, the returns will take care of themselves, and therefore you can be open to accept capital from any source?
You know, when you need to accept capital, you don't need any excuse to take it. But when you build the structure of a company, you need to think for the long run. And when you choose your investor, and this is the advantage of, I think, the EdTech, is that you have the ability to choose the investors, because not everybody invests in this, on one hand, not everybody invests in this type of technology or in this type of industry. But on the other hand, the people that invest in this industry believes in the mission, in one hand, and on the other hand, they have patience. And this is the most important issue here with the education. You need to have patience from the investors, patience from the company. And everybody compare high-tech or startups to roller coaster. So we consider EdTech as a slow roller coaster, which is much more worse than a regular roller coaster. So it takes time. We believe it takes time, but when your investors knows it, then they support you. And in our case, they're not only supporting us, they are pushing us. So it's important.
Okay. John, I want to ask you about ideological opposition to for-profit education when you're launching a for-profit business and then running them and scaling them. How severe has that opposition been, and how do you address it, if you can address it at all?
This is one of those issues that's different in different countries, and I can really speak mostly to the US, although I've done business elsewhere. The for-profit industry in education in the US has, for the most part, been terrible, right? You look at the for-profit universities, and they were a disaster, still are, but there are fewer of them. In the charter movement, nonprofit charters in the US outperform district schools. For-profit charters underperform district schools and nonprofits by a lot. You look at the textbook companies, they're not awesome. Like, it's hard to say I'm a for-profit guy in education and point to all the good things that we've done. So there is some opposition, and I would argue it's mostly deserved. And creating trust, creating a culture within your company that we make promises and we keep them, and this is what we do, and we're transparent and we're high integrity, is critical, even though the expectation is we still are going to just have to do this a long time before anybody will believe us.
Gaku, as I understand your business model, you are creating a bridge between teachers in the Philippines, tutors in the Philippines, and the language learning market in Japan. I know in the US, if you were trying to sell a tutoring service into a school district, a K-12 school district, it would be difficult to bring non-US tutors into the school system. Do you face issues like that in your business? And if not those issues, are there cultural issues that you face when you're trying to pair Filipino tutors with your consumers who are in another country?
Well, when we think of education service or EdTech, I think that, for example, like in our English education sector, we should not create a product that is for English education. We should divide into more specific needs, like English writing skills, or English speaking skills, or remembering words or phrases, or making the high score of TOEFL or IELTS. We have to split into very details. And then we selected the one part that we will give a place to speak English a lot. And then in Japan's case, there is a big need that people would like to have that kind of service. So that's why it matched. And then for Japanese people, Filipinos are already a good native speaker for Japanese. So it was okay for it. And then we could find that that kind of matching would happen to another world also. In some other area, like maybe like Brazil, it might have the same issue. But maybe in US, there is no issue like that, I think, because there are lots of native speakers, so they can speak a lot. So in that case, we have to create another things that, for example, they will have the good grammars, something like that, and then we have to bring that product to that market. So we have to see what kind of specific needs they have, and then we have to create a special product for it.
Okay, thank you. Itay, in Silicon Valley, EdTech entrepreneurs have been fully embraced, and I would argue EdTech is a core part of the Silicon Valley scene. In Israel, the high-tech scene is quite dynamic, and I get the sense that EdTech is not yet a full-fledged member of the industry, embraced by the industry. Do you feel like you're viewed by your peers who are operating in the high-tech scene as just a different breed of animal, and do they look at you like you need some therapy? And has that progressed over the last few years?
Yeah, I understand. Okay, it's a very interesting question. So basically, again, Israel is considered as a startup nation, and we have a proven track record for this. So we have a lot of exit and a lot of deals and investment, etc., etc. The education ecosystem has not yet proven a huge success. I feel, again, from year to year, I feel that this ecosystem is getting stronger. And I think that in the last 2 days, each and every one of you have been here and seen the great companies that we have and the great promises that we have. And I think that as soon as we as companies will prove ourselves, then the investors will also support us. So we need to prove ourselves, we need to be better, and I'm sure that you will hear about us, about the EdTech ecosystem in the near future, and a lot of great things are going to come from this ecosystem. And I think also this kind of summit and conference also support to expose our abilities as not as only as a startup nation, but as also as an EdTech nation.
Well said. John, I know you've talked a lot about brands in education. You know, there's something almost sacred about education to a lot of people. How do you go about building the proper type of brand in education?
Education brands happen very slowly. It took 20 years to build Princeton Review's brand. And frankly, we had a big head start, one that probably a trademark attorney would not allow us to do today in terms of the university. What I did in terms of 2U, though, I think is interesting. There are great education brands, Tel Aviv University here, or University of Southern California. There are, in some cases, 300-year-old institutions. And working with them has turned out to be really powerful. So at 2U, the original name of 2U was Tutor, number 2 TOR, named after my dog Tor. And people would say, why would you name your company after a dog? And the answer is because nobody cares who we are. They care who USC is. And I want to signal that we're not the story, they're the story. And then the other universities we work with, like Georgetown or UNC Chapel Hill or Yale. And I think a thoughtful approach would be, who are the organizations that you might work with who do have a brand that you can collaborate with rather than create one out of whole cloth?
Okay, I'm going to shift the conversation to exits now. John and Gaku, you've both had experience taking your companies public. Can you talk a little bit about whether there are any specific considerations as an education company in the public markets? Gaku, why don't you start?
Well, one of the merits of going public is it's like branding. We can get credibility and trust, and we can hire good people, and then also we can have more good corporate clients or schools because we are public. That is one merit of it. But it also has a demerit of it. We have to open everything, and we have to talk with investors and so on. And sometimes we cannot invest so much to the product because we have to think of the investors. So that is a merit and demerit of going public.
I was concerned about taking 2U public, and they're about to start showing a profit. And at that point, every professor at every university is going to wake up every quarter to see how much money his or her work made 2U. And that's not going to be a good thing. So I think to some degree, a public currency is a mixed bag. At the same time, from an early investor point of view, from venture capitalists and so forth, the notion that there's a public exit that you're gunning for, that this can scale into a significant business, is pretty attractive to those investors. And so it's, who do you want to work with? What are you signing on to when you brought them in? At 2U, I had brought in $100 million to build that company. When they wanted to take it public, they were going to take it public.
So, of course, an alternative to an IPO is transacting with a private equity investor or buyer or strategic. In terms of private equity, Itay, I don't know that you've had extensive experience there, but as you're thinking about an exit in the future, do you have any concern about who you might sell to? And as an education company, does private equity ownership only compound the negative perception? Not only are you for profit, which is, in some people's eyes, a very bad thing, but you're owned by blood-sucking private equity. Why would anybody ever want to do business with you?
Yes. As a company, you need to choose carefully your investors. It should align with your missions and not only looking for the next step or how much money do I make, because a company is like a child. You grow it up, even though that in the previous presentation you showed the slide of the death of the company. So as a parent, you grow up the company, okay? And it is really important to who do you deal with and how do you do it and what are the expectations. So I think that if you manage the expectations correctly and properly, so private investors will be willing to invest in the company because they know your agenda on one hand. And on the other hand, if they do not suit you as a company, then don't take them because otherwise it will create only problems. So the important thing is who you choose to dance with.
Okay, John, you want to weigh in?
I just realized I had to clarify that slide. The nice thing about a company versus a person is actually you can always be moving towards prime. The combination of flexibility and control is something that a startup is trying to achieve by adding controls and that an experienced company is trying to achieve by adding flexibility. Okay. And so it's always a movement towards prime.
Okay. Not after the prime.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully, yes.
So John, let me ask you about strategics. Because this is a relatively new sector, there's probably not as long a list of, generally speaking, of strategic acquirers in the sector. There are more every day, as my partner showed. General Assembly was acquired by Gaku, which is a company that's not usually, it's not from the from central casting when you think of education strategic buyers, and it's also abroad. So we're optimistic that the roster is expanding, but it is pretty confined at this stage. Given that, and another aspect of the question, there's an example which I know you're familiar with. I'm not sure Gaku and Itay you are, but in the United States, Rupert Murdoch from News Corp decided that he was going to get into the education business and paid close to $400 million for a company called Wireless Generation. And shortly thereafter, the company began to lose a lot of traction and business, and it appeared that some of that was due to political opposition. So if you intend to sell to a strategic because you think that's the best outcome for you, do you care who you sell to? Does it matter? Or are you just looking to maximize the exit price and you'll sell to anybody?
I think any entrepreneur here, this is more than a business. And you build a community of people, your employees, the schools or the students you work with, placing them in the hands of someone who's going to screw it up, or someone who's going to take it in a terrible political direction is problematic. And I think that being thoughtful when you build a company about who you one day might sell it to is not a terrible exercise. Jay Walker, who did Priceline, said every company he built, he knew who he was going to sell it to in the end, even the ones he ended up taking public. Because it helps you define what do we do and what don't we do? What are the boundaries of this company? And it's a focusing device.
Thank you. Well, the good news, at least in the United States, is financial buyers are paying a lot more for education companies than strategics these days, and there's a lot of liquidity in that system. So the length of the roster isn't as much of an issue now as it once was. Anyway, I think we're out of time. I want to thank our panelists for all their comments, and
you very much.
thanks to the audience for listening.
Thanks.